Okay, we're just letting people in and then we'll start shortly. Good morning, welcome everybody.
Do you want me to begin, Mel? Mel, you're on mute. I can't hear what you're saying.
Sorry. I'm just letting a few more people in.
Okay, perfect. Let me know.
Yeah. Yep. Thanks very much, Emma.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone. Very, very good morning to all of you. Welcome to this year's Defining Your Second Career. I know many of you, but for those of you who I don't know, my name is Emma May and I'm Director of Operations and Employment at Work Avenue. And I'm really, really delighted to welcome you all today. I'd like to spend a couple of minutes to tell you a little bit about today's event, but also tell you a little bit about Work Avenue. We were launched in 2006 with one single aim, which was to help people to earn a living, either through creating employment or by growing a business. Work Avenue, the organisation, creates opportunities for everyone at any life stage in any situation. In the intervening 15 years or so since our launch, the economy has boomed, the economy has busted, and everything in between. We're living through, or have lived through, depending upon your perspective, a pandemic. And in each instance, we at Work Avenue have flexed our service offerings to meet the demands of the times, and this is very, very much true of today. Work Avenue has already assisted nearly 2,000 people this year, approximately 3/4 of whom are looking for employment, and 1/4 of whom are starting and growing a business. We offer one-to-one meetings with all our clients, giving them the best chance to make a success of their business or to help them find work, as offering regular events and workshops on topics such as creating a contemporary and elegant CV, interview skills, networking, and presentation skills. Tomorrow, it's still not too late, to book a place on our presentation skills workshop tomorrow at 2 o'clock. I would say that over 70% of our clients who attend our workshops actually are successful in securing job interviews. I referenced earlier how we aim to adapt our services to meet the prevailing conditions and demands, and this is especially true at the moment. The last 20 years have been, the last 20 months, the last 20 years we're not talking about, but the last 20 months have been quite extraordinary for all of us and have tested our coping strategies on so many levels. There has been so much written and so many events, both at Work Avenue and in the wider world, and I don't particularly want to rake over COVID yet again, except for this. It was widely predicted and assumed that as we came out of lockdown in the summer, the effects of the pandemic, coupled with many unknown effects of Brexit, would mean that the economy would tank and unemployment would hit record levels. What has actually happened has been way off that. The economy is strong, as evidenced by the budget this month, and the employment landscape is also robust, and not just in entry-level roles thrown up by Brexit. Even within Work Avenue, our jobs board is consistently advertising over 110 vacancies, which is double the number of vacancies before COVID was even heard of. But, and it's a big but, we all know only too well that life is a lot more nuanced than that. And that brings me neatly to today's conference. Despite what's happening in the wider world, we are well aware of some of the issues that people can face in the middle to later stages of their working life and who find themselves seeking their next move, sometimes against their will. You might find yourself looking for a new role in an unfamiliar world at a stage of your life when you thought things were secure. You believe you know you have so much experience and regard yourself as flexible. And yet, despite that, you fail to be shortlisted, or if you are, you always seem to be picked at the post by another applicant. While some of your skills and knowledge may be up to date, perhaps there are some that have failed to keep pace with the changing contemporary workplace. For some clients, we have seen this lead to low confidence, low self-esteem, and sometimes mental health issues, let alone devastating financial insecurity and knock-on effects for all family members. Today, in Defining Your Second Career, we'll take a fresh look at this and hear from people who have faced just these issues. I hope we can inspire you with their stories and pass on their tips and advice. I will shortly introduce to you our keynote speaker today, David Arden. But before I do, let me briefly run through how the event's going to work. Each of you will have received a schedule and links for all of our sessions. Since this is an online event, attendance is not capped to any particular session, and you can attend any session you wish. And there's a choice of, you can choose from two options at 5 minutes past 10, 5 minutes past 11, and 5 minutes past 12. We will convene for a Q&A session with the Work Avenue team, for which you also have the link, at the end of the conference at 1 o'clock. Now, this session is an open forum, and we will be addressing any questions submitted in advance, together with any questions that either you've just got in general or that have thrown up from any of the sessions you've heard today. And I, together with my colleagues acting as co-hosts, will be very, very happy to address any issues you have in that wash-up session at the end of the morning. So pop questions on the chat in the normal way. We all know the regular protocols. And now I'd like to turn to our keynote speaker today, particularly special to us this year. It will not have escaped the attentions of many of you that in September, Work Avenue gained a new CEO, David Arden. David actually is a person who has defined his second career, and he's going to enlarge upon that. But before he does, let me tell you a little bit about his first career. David's a biology and chemistry graduate from the University of Brighton, and he actually started his career in the Metropolitan Police as an internal management consultant. This was followed by a series of roles in central government, including working on the London 2012 Olympics and other roles in the Home Office and the Cabinet Office. It was after this that he made a break into the not-for-profit sector, taking on the role of CEO of the S&P Sephardi community before landing the top role at Work Avenue earlier this year. Having held such diverse roles in so many environments, I know he will have a perspective on building and changing a career at various stages of a working life, which he's now going to share with us all. David, thank you for giving up your time to address us this morning. I know you're actually scheduled to be somewhere else today, and therefore really appreciate you prioritising right now this conference. I wish you all an enjoyable and thought-provoking event. And if anyone has any questions for David, again, please put them in the chat, and myself and my colleagues will be only too happy to address them, or David will in the time that he has until 10 o'clock this morning. David, I'm going to hand over to you. Many thanks.
Good morning. So thank you, Emma. What an introduction. So I'm wearing two hats this morning. Obviously, I am the new CEO at Work Avenue, as Emma's just mentioned, being enrolled for 2 months. So I'm going to give a little bit of an insight to my career to date, which hopefully will be interesting for you, but also to say, again, to reiterate what Emma has already said, thank you to all of you that have come to join the Defining Your Second Career event today. And I'm sure you will take great advantage, and it will be extremely useful and hopefully inspirational for you to take advantage of the sessions we have following me speaking today. So I'm delighted to be here and to talk to you a little bit about my career. it's ups, hopefully not so many downs, but the twists and turns that one has during career to get to where I am today. Before I talk about myself and hopefully my interesting career highlights to date, I thought I'd share something else with you, a useful reminder to all of us, in a slightly light-hearted way, that the challenges of developing and even maintaining a second career can affect anyone, no matter who they are. So Melissa, do you want to, we're going to try the technology to see if it works to share screen. Okay, start from there. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that. This says a bit about my background and my hobbies rather than anything else. But it got me thinking, defining your second career, we can just have the first bullet point. Even footballers at the peak of their career, most footballers have to have a second career because the longevity of being able to play is fairly limited. I picked Cristiano Ronaldo because he's one of the pinnacles of the footballing world at the moment. And I found this fantastic picture of him, which shows him from babyhood, his first, I think, footballing days in Manchester United and what he looks like now. So do you want to just put forward the first bullets? So Cristiano Ronaldo, possibly one of the greatest footballers of all time. It's debatable, but it is, he's certainly up there in the top 5. And I think that's very much not for debate. Okay, so he has played and continues to play at the highest levels. So we're not talking about, way down Vauxhall Premier League type football. This is top football in at least across 3 continents and has played in the Premier League at the highest level too. Cristiano Ronaldo has won 5 Ballon d'Or awards. I'm not going to bore you too much about the details around the Ballon d'Or, but it was an award that was set up by a French footballing magazine, I think, some years ago. And it basically is an award that is given to a footballer who displays the greatest abilities, capabilities, behaviours, not just on the pitch, but off the pitch as well. Now, most footballers in their career would dream to have won Ballon d'Or awards. In fact, 99.99%, I suspect, never, don't even get a look in to get on the list that are shortlisted for Ballon d'Or award. But Cristiano Ronaldo has won 5. I think he might have the record or pretty closely tied with another who won't be mentioned, but clearly at the pinnacle. Do you want to go next one? He's won absolutely every trophy possible except the World Cup, and that's probably more down to the fact that Portugal can't get their act together and have a really good team, good enough to win in the World Cup. But he is certainly one of the most decorated, and he's won FA Cups, Premier Leagues, Champions League, and he's even won the Cup for Portugal in the European Cup. So do you want to move on to the next slide? Last bullet point. So he's 36 years old. Hopefully you can all see this. That is very old in footballing terms. For all of us on the call, we probably think, that's still, I can just about remember being 36. But in footballing terms, you're practically in retirement age. So it is very unusual for someone to continue playing at 36 years old. Do you want to move on? So these are his career highlights very quickly. He joined Porto, Portuguese team, at 16. At 18 years old, pretty much unknown, moved to Manchester United. A few years later, went to Real Madrid. These are all top teams at their time in their respective leagues, the Spanish League, Italian League, and the Premier League. And at 30, he spent several years at Juventus. Now, each of these teams that he played, he won everything. Manchester United won the FA Cup, Champions League. Same at Real Madrid. I think he won the Spanish League 6 times at Real Madrid. And you would have thought by the time someone gets into the 30s, in footballing terms, it's time to retire. Not so much for Cristiano Ronaldo. In 2021, he came back to Manchester United 18 years after actually having left, and he's now in the side. And he also captains the Portuguese national side. But how does he do it? How has this man continued to maintain his career at that age, which in normal career terms, we'll be talking about somebody probably well into their 70s. Okay, so he has pivoted and adapted to his strengths. So he has an absolute determination to succeed. So for him, winning is everything. But he's had to change his fitness and his lifestyle, alter the way he lives. the way he eats, he has extremely strict diet of only having, I think, chicken meals 3 times a day, 5 times a day. He's adapted his training regime. So this is someone that cannot train the same way that 17, 18, 19-year-old footballers train, because the impact on the body, the muscles and the joints means that he cannot do high impact weight training, weightlifting and running. So his training regime obviously involves a considerable amount of swimming, lower impact, and things which will keep him fit, but will have the least impact on his joints. And he has also adapted his position on the pitch. And that's a key. So Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who's currently the manager at Manchester United, how much longer, who knows? When he was asked to quote about Cristiano Ronaldo, he said he's evolved as a player. He used to play on the wide right, the wide left, and up front. These are 3 areas that need skill, speed. One needs to be able to run up and down the wing, and you need to be fit, and you need to be young, and you need to be healthy. So he has adapted and moved to a more of a centre forward role. So he's hangs around the goal area and scores goals, more of a poacher. So he has defined and changed his career based on his new strengths. And for me, that is the epitome that even footballers at the pinnacle of their career need to learn. If they want to continue to play football, have to learn to adjust the way they play. And on the last slide. And here he is in his second debut back at Manchester United, scoring 2 goals in his opening match. I'm in there somewhere at the back now, I'm not really. But so you can take the share screen off. Thanks, Melissa. So hopefully a nice light-hearted way of reminding everyone that no matter what you do, you have to adapt if you want to continue in the same kind of career. And we all have to do that. We can't continue doing what we're always doing if we want to carve out a new niche. Very few people in their career have a trajectory which is a horizontal line. If you imagine a XY graph, there are always, hopefully there are peaks, hopefully not too many troughs, but along the way there are some flat lines, some plateaus. And in my view, they are often the periods in which we are finding ourselves, we're upskilling, or we're waiting for the next opportunity. But it's very common. And as I discuss and talk about my career, I think you'll note that obviously sometimes we're moving up, but also sometimes where we're plateauing, where I'm upskilling, I'm waiting for the next opportunity to come along. And sometimes, it's that plateau which really gives you the opportunity to take that big step into your next career. So going back, way back to my background, starts way back many decades ago, giving away my age. I went to Carmel College, which is sadly now closed, now defunct, but it was a beautiful boarding school in the Oxfordshire countryside. It was equipped with absolutely everything you could want. It was actually fairly idyllic. Certainly for sports, if you were a sports man, you could do everything. You could play football, badminton, squash. You could go on the river, in boats, rowing. So we were, pretty much spoilt in terms of sport. The education was also good, pretty well-rounded education. But the careers advice, in my view, and this is where it becomes quite critical for what we're talking about today, was pretty draconian. And so much so that it ingrained in my brain. And I can recall well over 35 years ago, sitting in a dusty, I'm probably fabricating in my mind now, but a fairly Dickensian room, dusty bookshelves. Sitting on the other side of the table was our physics teacher, who also doubled up as a careers advisor. Why he was the careers advisor, I never really understood. But anyway, he was there. And I was called in at 14 and asked to give, to talk to him about my career thoughts today at 14. Now, I had always had a dream of wanting to be a doctor. I'm one of those people that has an innate desire to want to help others. And to me, it was the obvious, a nice Jewish boy becoming a doctor, who'd have thought. So that was my kind of dream role. But sitting down with the careers advisor who looked at my GCSE, mock GCSEs at the time, looked back up at me, looked down at the sheet of mock results, and then said, "What do you want to do, David?" And I said, "Well, I want to be a doctor." And he said to me, "Forget it. You'll never be good enough," or words to that effect. You should try doing something else. Now, of course, that's horrendous advice. And that was crushing and demotivating, and meant that from that point on, I actually believed the hype. I'm delighted to say that our careers advisor at Work Avenue would never give that kind of advice. But I guess in the day, that's what we did. We based it purely on academic ability. But I was told, carry on doing the science. I had a love for the sciences. So I carried on that path. And as Emma mentioned earlier, I took biology and chemistry degree at the University of Brighton. I was told, you get a degree in the sciences, jobs, there'll be people be knocking on your door asking to give you a job. But when I graduated, it was in the mid-90s, just the tail end of a recession. It took me 6 months to find permanent employment. I went to places where they told me I was overqualified. I mean, we've heard this many times before. And I actually spent time queuing up at the job centre, thinking, what on earth am I doing here? I had very close to first-class honours, literally 1% or 2 off, and I'm still looking for my first job. But I never really thought that I wouldn't get on the career ladder. It was frustrating, but I plugged away. And I thought, I'm going to get the first role. Basically, I need to get on the career ladder. It's really important for me to get a job for my CV. So I'm going to take the first role that's relevant to my background. And I did. And it was a pharmaceutical patent company that I think no longer exists, but it was basically desk-based. And I knew at that time it wasn't going to be a long-term prospect. It was really to get myself established on the career ladder. But it was in patents. So my pharmaceutical background meant I was using software to extract information from pharmaceutical patents that countries were submitting, so that other pharmaceutical companies could access to find out when drugs were coming up for renewal in terms of their patent. And I even thought at that time that I'd apply for a role in the European Patent Office, which was a big job at that point. And I went for an interview at the European Patent Office in The Hague. And this is a cautionary tale, one of my cautionary tales. I thought it'd be a fantastic opportunity living in The Hague. I was single, great opportunity, flew out, all expenses spared and no expense spared, turned up at the interview, and I walked into the room and the interviewer started talking to me in German. And that moment in the first 10 seconds when you think, what on earth is going on here? And I said, I don't speak German. And then he moved into French. And it actually turned out that they were looking for someone who was trilingual. But then that never actually came up in the job description. So as you can imagine, it was a pretty quick interview and I was sent home. But it was a lesson to me to do my background research before I go for a job. So next, as Emma mentioned, I spent 5 years in the Metropolitan Police Service as an internal management consultant. And that came about purely by chance. I talk about grabbing opportunities. At the time, I was sitting in the office opposite someone who wanted to apply to be an operational police officer. Actually, a lady sat opposite me in the office. And they didn't have an internet at home at the time. It shows the times that we were living in. But I did. And I said I'd have a look on the internet to see what jobs were available. And I found this role for an internal management consultant. I thought, this ticks all the boxes of the kind of thing I want to do. So I applied for the job and I fortunately was successful. And I traveled the length and the breadth of the Metropolitan Police Service. The strapline of what we did was to provide ethical and impartial advice to decision makers, senior decision makers. And I really honed my early skills in project management, presentation, facilitation skills, business process re-engineering. And the work was fascinating and varied and ranged from doing an evaluation of a new jury protection service. This is particularly for high sort of crime type cases in which members of the jury could be at risk of being nobbled. You can look that up later, but it is a term. So I went through a number of really, really interesting project-based work, did a Met Police-wide review of security vetting, which was also really interesting, and also got very high level of security clearance whilst I was there, which meant that I could do more sensitive work. One particular aspect of the project, which of my role, which jumped out to me when I was thinking about this, I did a review of the firearms inquiry teams, which is quite topical at the moment for unfortunate reasons in the press recently. They're split demographically around geographically, around the metropolitan area. And my remit was quite clear. I was to look at identifying good practice in one or two of the pockets where the inquiry teams worked and find out where others were not working so well and share the good practices, not rocket science stuff. They're looking at their business processes. But unfortunately, one of the teams had not been given the memo. And they were under the impression that a colleague and I were going there to close them down. So I don't know if you can imagine, and I'm sitting there, as you can't see, I'm not the biggest, tallest, and most imposing of people. And I walked into what could only be described as a dungeon in firearms inquiry teams in I won't mention where it is, somewhere in London. And they were particularly difficult, and it was a lesson to me to make sure that people were clear what you were doing before you got there. But you know, the review itself was reasonably successful, and we came out of it okay. But at that time, I felt that there was a glass ceiling, and it was time to explore further things. And getting out of the consultancy group and moving up within the Metropolitan Police was actually quite challenging. The highlight for me being there was actually getting a commendation, which is, you know, not that common. But I got a commendation with a colleague for developing the very first Met Police corporate strategic assessment, which is basically a methodology, a tool we developed, which looks at emerging threats and can be used for senior decision makers when they're setting their priorities for the next 2 to 3 years. So that was a big tick for me, a big a success, getting accommodation in the Met. I decided to move on, and I spent a couple of years in IT, honing my skills in Unisys, and then moved into Michelle. And at Unisys, I joined as a project manager, and within a couple of weeks, I was told, you're going to be project managing IT projects. And now those of you involved in IT know that it's not an automatic transition from looking at people, business, and change to IT. So it was a little bit of a baptism of fire. And I do remember times being on conference calls in a sweat, thinking, I have no idea what language they're talking in. I'm sure it's English, but there's lots of terminology I don't understand. But obviously you pick it up. And delivering project management, I'm a great believer, having done it for many years. The concepts, the principles are always the same. You're trying to deliver something tangibly at the end. So after spending some time in Unisys, I went to Michelle, and Michelle had we had staff working on the 2012 Olympics. I thought, what a great opportunity to go and work on the biggest construction infrastructure project the UK has ever seen at that point. So I went to move onto the London 2012 Olympics, and it was a fantastic opportunity for so many different reasons. Being on the 22nd floor of the Barclays headquarters, which is where the Olympic Delivery Authority were based, I could look out the window and see Stratford. And I joined during 2009 when they were in their demolition and dig phase, which is basically as it says on the tin. You couldn't see anything but cranes and lights. But during the 2 years I was there, I literally saw the Olympic Athletes Village and the Olympic Stadium being built, which was, it was a phenomenal thing. 2,000 people working on the biggest project with the most immovable deadline you could ever imagine. You just can't be late with the Olympics. So I worked as a senior project manager on that and really enjoyed it. And it was an introduction to me for, I was replacing someone who was off sick for a couple of weeks, but it ended up being there 2 years. And I was brought into a project that was effectively failing. It was the first time I've been introduced to a project that was not doing well, the usual over budget, behind schedule. And the team, the delivery partner, was using an outsourced supplier. And it was just too expensive. And I was asked, can you save this project? So I sat there thinking, what am I going to do? And actually people around me, this is all about the networking. I started talking to people in the area I was working in. It turned out I was surrounded by some really gifted technical people that were working within the project team. So I recommended we cancel the supplier contract and build a performance management system, which is what the task was, internally, which we did. And it came in on time, about 1/10 of the budget. So saving a huge amount of time. And the purpose of this performance management system was so that we could provide almost real-time data on how many female Lithuanian bricklayers were there on site, to make that up, but real-time information. So that was a real success. I really, really enjoyed that. It's coming towards the end of my tenure on the Olympics, and I was told by the director of the Athletes Village that I built up a really good rapport with. Why don't you leave, Michelle, and come and work for us in Mace? So Mace was a big construction company, and he wanted me to come and work for him. And he said, it'd be great. My first project will be 2.5 years in Dubai. And being a married person with a young child, I thought for a young Jewish family, moving to Dubai is perhaps not necessarily the best move. So I politely declined. And then in my search for the next role, I discovered a Quango, quasi-non-government organisation, basically at arm's length government department. And it was called the NPIA, the National Policing Improvement Agency. And they specialise in managing the national critical police infrastructure, the National Police Fingerprint System being the main one. So because of my previous experience in the Met, I moved into, I got a job as a senior project manager there, developing and implementing changes to the policing fingerprint system. I did some amazing work with the Ministry of Defence, flew out to Virginia quite a lot of times. Again, difficult to go into too much detail, but supporting a lot of overseas operations, particularly in Afghanistan. And, I really enjoyed my time doing that. But in August 2012, I think the dates are about right, the coalition government had come into power, and they had announced in the papers, we're going to get rid of all the quangos, all the bonfire of the quangos. I'm sure most of you would recall that. And it was almost overnight. We're going to close them all down because we don't know what they will do. They're at arm's length. It's costing the taxpayer and the government a lot of money. We're going to close them down. They're not very efficient. And the NPIA was earmarked for closure. So we were closing. But post being announced that we were closing, the then PM and actually the Home Secretary at the time realised that the NPIA actually managed the National Police Fingerprint System, the National DNA Database, PNC, which is the Police National Computer. So without these things running, literally the country would collapse because there's no way for policing to continue. So we were, it makes me laugh almost, but we were transitioned almost by stealth overnight into the Home Office. So the entire department was taken hook, line and sinker and dumped into the Home Office, which for me was great because I suddenly became an official civil servant. And we were subsumed into a department called the Home Office Biometrics Program. And I continued to develop fingerprint technology in the biometrics program and had a really, really supportive director who really cared for his senior management. He wanted to get the best out of us. And I was very fortunate that he actually sat me down one day and said, look, you've been doing fingerprints for a number of years now. Do you fancy moving into different biometrics? I mean, I actually had a choice, which is unbelievable. And I said, yeah, what are the options? And he said, well, you can go into face or DNA. And for some reason, face just sounded a bit more exciting. So I went into and moved into developing facial biometrics. And again, working with the Passport Office, working on Egate, if anybody's been through the airport when they work, and they work very well. I know there's always some issues with that. And it was just a really, really interesting time developing cutting edge technology to not just bring offenders to justice, but also to make life easier for the individual getting in and out of the airport. We actually did a trial of a new Egate at the airport. I remember a few of us went out to do a demo of a desk-based face biometrics unit. You could literally move from table to table rather than a huge Egate. And we pulled people out of random in a queue and asked them whether they would mind going into using this new piece of technology. We called out this young, I can still remember it now, young, good-looking-ish guy. We'll say that, surrounded with it looked like a number of people with him in a sort of guitar on his back. And we said, would you be prepared to do it? He said, yes. And there was like an entourage following him. We just couldn't understand it. We held him up for quite a long time and then eventually made his flight. And we subsequently discovered afterwards he was a famous pop star. I'd never heard of him in Paris, called Tom Odell. But he was happy to take part. But it was a really, really great time, and I learned an awful lot about that. By this point in time, I'd been in the same type of role for several years, and I wanted to get exposed to other government departments. And I found that a role had come up in the Cabinet Office, heading a department in a unit called the Infrastructure and Projects Authority, which is an autonomous department. It's quite unique in that it reports two ways, right into the Chief Executive of the Cabinet Office, head of the Cabinet Office, and also head of the Treasury, with two reporting lines, which is not great from a governance perspective, which is ironic, really being in the Cabinet Office. But I didn't get the job. But I got called up by the head of the department, saying, you've got a great CV. Why don't you come and work for us on loan for 2 years from the Home Office? It gets you exposure to lots of government departments. And, to me, it seems like a bit of a no-brainer. And again, the director of the Home Office at the time was really supportive. He could have said, you're abandoning the program. But he said, no, I think it's really good for you. It'll be a really good positive move. And we provided project and program assurance across all government departments. There's a concept of a government major projects portfolio, which is about 200 to 300 projects on the programs. And it ranges from everything like universal credit being one to, lesser known, more secretive type programs, which are normally very high value in terms of delivery. So we would go and sit on sit on boards and recommend how they can better move their organization, their programs forward. But decision to move on. Going back to my roots, I always had an innate desire to want to make a difference, and that was from a very young person wanting to go to medicine to help people. And when you're in the civil service, it doesn't matter what you do, you're still a very, very small fish in a huge pond. So to me, it felt like it was time to make a move out of civil service. And again, in conversations with my director, who had actually become a sort of mentor at the time as well, said to me, well, maybe you should go and move into the not-for-profit sector, because it is a means to get a far more tangible feel for the outcomes, which is what seems to drive your desire to your work. So a role came up in the community whilst at the Cabinet Office to go and work in the Spanish and Portuguese Sephardi community, and it looked like I ticked all the boxes. It was a charity sector role. It was in the community. What better way to give back than to go and work in a community role? And I'd never worked in the community role before, and I wasn't Sephardi. But it was the right time for me to pivot my career from frontline delivery, to a more leadership role, using the experience of understanding how to financial controls, putting in place good governance, creating a more commercially astute organisation, which is what I felt I did. The time at the S&P, the organisation wasn't necessarily the strongest place financially. We put far greater controls in, and I created a far more commercially astute. How can we bring more revenue into a charity? Membership alone doesn't cover the cost, as anybody knows about community roles. So bringing a nursery in, which is one idea, and the rent would cover our cost of relocating to an open plan office. So I put in a number of initiatives, which provides a far more stable organisation moving forward. And now, at that time, in the S&P, in my early days, the first time I formally engaged more formally with a mentor. And I can't, emphasize and overestimate enough how important a mentor is. Anybody can have and should have a mentor. It's an opportunity for someone who's got a similar kind of background, but understands the landscape, understands the environment, and can be a sounding board, and can obviously and often be outside of the politics, an objective person. So my mentor was there throughout my time at the S&P, and was sort of fundamental to me helping to develop my role in the community, and also doing some of the unpopular things. He was one who taught me you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. And if you're in a leadership role, sometimes, unfortunately, eggs do need to be broken. But it was a great experience, and I do feel that the charity, the Spanish and Portuguese Sephardi community, is in a far more strong position. And towards the end of that time, I realised that developing the network that I had accumulated over time was also really key. So building and developing my network of people across the divide of civil service, not-for-profit sector, is really important, not just for sharing good practice, but all for building ideas and for looking for the next opportunity. And a network, having a good network and a good, strong network is key. So, I did that, and I think it was professionally and personally, a really sensible move at that point in my career, moving from the civil service, the rigidity, where you are very, very small fish, into a community where I feel I can make a difference. 3.5 years later, here I am at Work Avenue as the chief executive, 8-9 weeks in, and it truly is a privilege to be here, to be doing something that I and the team and my team really believe. And I think I'm exceptionally fortunate. I'd say that to someone, but I'm exceptionally fortunate to have such a highly professional and capable team. And we are all here to help. Our raison d'etre is to create employment and grow businesses and allow people, anybody that comes knocking on our door, the opportunity to earn a living. There'll always be things that we can improve everywhere. There's no such thing as the finished product. But I truly believe in the Work Avenue model, and it has huge potential, and to help anyone who comes knocking. So I think that's about it from me. I don't know if there are any questions anybody had. I appreciate we're getting close to time.
Does anyone have any questions for David?
Stunned to silence.
Just to close, David, I have one question that I would I'd like to ask you to sort of ponder over and give some thoughts. What would be your best advice, having been through career change yourself? And obviously you've given a very, what I would call a very coherent narrative as to all the changes that have taken place in your career. But what would be the best advice that you would give to everyone on this call? Because perhaps, it's stop-start sometimes for people. What would be your overarching advice to someone?
Sure, it's a good question. So I think, for many people, it's stop-start. I think it's really ideal is to know really what you want to do, to have a really, strong focus about where you want to get to. Because obviously that helps to define it might not be that you get there immediately, but then knowing where you want to get to and then thinking about how to develop the plan. It sounds very contrived, but actually, and some people get the opportunity to just land their dream job and that's it. But for most people, it's finding their way. Having known what I know now, I think being able to take a step back and think, where do I think I want to be? Where are my real strengths? What do I think I can really do and achieve? And put that as a key milestone somewhere in the future and build a kind of a plan roadmap around that. And it might be that end point is a little way coming. It takes a few stages to get to. But I would say that, and coupled with having, I mentioned before about having a mentor, but I think having somebody who, because we can be quite blinkered in our views, and somebody else coming in with an objective advice that knows you and knows your skill sets can help hone that thinking as well. So I think that would be my advice.
I think that's great advice. I would, just to close, I would say, yes, take a step back. But sometimes when we're so mired in our own situation, generally always when we're in our own situation, it's very hard to lift ourselves out of it and see ourselves from a perspective. That's when someone else can help. Take advice from someone you trust, a professional, or a friend, a family member, someone whose advice you value, or many people's advice who you value. The more advice you get, the more of a perspective each of us can draw on our own situations. And, gradually the fog will lift, the pathway hopefully will demystify itself a little bit, and we can find a way forward for ourselves. Mel, I'm very conscious it's 10 o'clock.
So did you say Mel? I'm very conscious.
I did say Mel, yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Emma, and thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
We will now be moving on to our next session. So you should all have the links to the next session. You can choose which one you go for. I'm sure you have registered for the one that you want to go for, but you have a choice. Either to go to how to build resilience post-COVID, or following your passion. And so you'll just sign out of this session and then sign back into that session. I can also ask you, a lot of you have not got your full names on. You've got something that sort of doesn't look like your name at all. So if you're just able to change them to your full names, then we'll know who's attended. That would be really helpful for us. Thank you. I also recommend keeping your cameras on throughout this morning. We sort of toyed whether or not to do this in person. We chose to do it online because we thought that probably most people would enjoy that more. But we want to make it as much like the real thing as possible. So if you possibly can, then that would be amazing. Look forward to seeing you at the next session. Thanks very much. All the best and see you later on. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye for now, I should say.